Hi, Asa. So we're going to have a little bit of a conversation about the fascinating subject of finance
I have been scared.
related to NGOs and what that looks like in a practical sense. But first of all, for people that might not know you, could you just introduce yourself, your name and your role, please?
Right. My name is Asa. I'm director of Intercollege, and I have been working a bit over 20 years in the non-formal sector with the NGOs and associations and so on and so forth. And you?
So I'm Baby J. I'm the managing director of Baby People. We're a not-for-profit music and arts organisation based in the UK. We mainly work with young people who aren't in mainstream education and use hip hop culture, music, and the arts as a way of kind of re-engaging them. So
that's great. A hip hop artist talking about finance.
yeah. Perfect fit. So finance isn't the most exciting subject in the world, and also it's not something when you get into trying to set up a not-for-profit organisation, usually which you do because there's something you want to achieve in the world, something you want to change in the world. You don't do it kind of thinking about finance. Often money is the furthest thing from your mind. You know, it's kind of how can I change something, make something a bit different. So I want to just rewind. I don't want to think about today, but when Intercollege first started, you know, what was your understanding of finance? What was your kind of sense and kind of awareness of what it needed doing in finance, or was there any? Were you just kind of working it out on the fly?
So when I started Intercollege, I already had over 10 years experience from different NGOs and so on. So at that time, I kind of already developed a pretty good understanding of finance. But I say first time when I was employed as Secretary General for an NGO, I didn't have the slightest idea about bookkeeping and so on. But I was so lucky, so we employed a bookkeeper. I had a bookkeeper 5 hours per week to do that job for me. But we were so lucky that our bank actually provided a bookkeeping course, and it was 2 evenings, 2 evenings of each 2 hours, where we were sitting and doing bookkeeping the old-fashioned way with the colored books and so on. And I have to say, from all the courses I have participated in, from all the education I have, these 2 evenings have been what I have been using most throughout my career. And not because I'm doing bookkeeping, absolutely not, but just to have an understanding what's happening on the other side. When you're speaking with your bookkeeper, that you understand his or her language, and you have an understanding on what's going on inside that black box called your bookkeeping. So I would say that if I should give an advice to somebody that starts up, that is try to get a little understanding of it, and it just have to be 2 times 2 hours, basic bookkeeping, so you speak the same language as your bookkeeper. You can look inside that black box and use that as a tool.
And how much, because obviously bookkeeping is one part of that, but then there's also kind of like financial management and having a bit of a plan with your organisation. Of, I mean, a lot of the time when people start a business or a not-for-profit, people will say, you know, write a business plan, have a plan for what's going to happen. And part of that plan will be a financial plan. So in the early stages, how much of a financial plan did you actually have? And was that, you know, did you need a financial plan in the early stages?
I must admit that I have never not done a budget for my organization. And I never did a business plan up to the point where I had to do one to present it to some donors. So in that regard, I think it has been on the feeling, just on the gut feeling on what should I do here, what feels more right here. And I don't know if it's because I've been lucky or because I have enough conservative nature in planning the economy that I never had those financial problems or cash flow problems. But no, I actually never did a annual budget for our organization. So, well, what about you? Are you actually sitting on those budgets? And did you do a business plan when you started up?
I mean, interestingly, similar to yourself, that I got kind of forced to go on this kind of I think something connected to something we did when we first started. You had to go on this course where you had to write a business plan. And I remember writing it just thinking, this is complete fiction. I've got no idea that any of the stuff I'm writing here is going to happen. I've got no experience and I remember feeling quite resentful that I even had to write it at the time. And that, obviously now as an organisation, we have a business plan slightly connected to funders and boards and people that we have to present this to, but also that it is a useful tool. But initially, often when you start something very new, you have no idea how things are going to go. It is very difficult to plan, and it's very difficult to plan with finances. It's interesting what you said about, the fact that you didn't have a real financial plan, but you were conservative in nature, because I think that was true of us. So I can't ever remember sitting down and working out how much is going to come in over the next, let alone year, the next 3 months, and how much you were going to spend. But my nature was, if I've got £1,000 coming in, I want to spend £100. And a kind of a way that I've always done business, and I still do business to this day. And even though we're talking about not-for-profits and NGOs, they are still businesses.
Yes.
And it's interesting while we're talking about finance, because for a lot of people that run NGOs, the idea of finance is something very uncomfortable, because they associate that with business and profit and capitalism and all these things that they haven't set up an NGO to have. But actually, if you don't take care of the finances of your organisation, your organisation won't survive. And if you're trying to do something about homelessness and you don't take care of the finances, in a year's time, your organisation might not be there and you can't help the homeless.
Exactly. A bankrupt NGO is not helping anybody. Completely.
But I think in the early stages, what I used to do is I would always base my financial plans, as short as they may be, and that might be 6 weeks, couple of months in my head, on the worst case scenario. And so I always used to think, right, we're doing this job, we're doing this piece of work, or we've got this funding, we're going to get £1,000, we're going to have to spend this much on rental, on staffing, on premises, utilities, whatever, and there's this much to do the thing, and we're going to have £80 left overwards. But I'd always think, well, it might cost me a bit more, and I might not get the full amount in. So if the funder was going to give me £800 up front and £200 at the back end, I would always base the project on the £800, like the £200 I was never going to need. Because what happens is, as we know, when you run any project or any business, is other things crop up that you don't expect.
Right.
They're going to cost you money. So you might have extra expensive, you might have a problem in the project. Yeah, it's all that other stuff.
No, and I think that's essential, because yes, the budgets and the business plans and the annual action plans and so on, they are wonderful tools to kind of be inclusive and include your staff, include your stakeholders and so on in the process of developing some visions and giving a direction. But they're no more than that, and that's what we have to remember, because if a bill comes in the door, we do have to pay it, regardless of if it's in our budget or not. And if a donor pass by and say, do you want a sum of money to do something, we won't go, no, it's not in our budget, right? So it is just a plan. And as any other things, plans are okay, they're good. But the most important thing is actually not to be limited by a plan and just to stick to a plan in order to stick to it, but to, at any given time, to plan and get the best out of any given situation.
And it's interesting, because I think that same kind of entrepreneurial spirit you need to have to be able to effectively run an NGO or set up a project, and kind of like, actually, whatever this project throws at me, I'm going to manage, I'm going to put things in place. And you have to have a similar kind of approach almost when it comes to finance.
Yes.
Because things change. You're not selling product A and you're going to sell between this amount and that amount. So your income is going to be between this, and you've got these fixed outgoings. Running an NGO doesn't work like that. Like you said, you might kind of one year think, well, our turnover is going to be, 100,000 euros, but then another funder comes along or a trust and gives you, 300,000 euros, and all of a sudden you've got a massive increased. And I've seen this happen with NGOs. I've seen NGOs where the funding they've received is vastly bigger than what the organisation is actually in a position to manage.
Yes.
And the struggle has been the other way. It's not a commercial company where you're going to go, oh, we've got this massive surplus profit that can just sit in the bank, or that we can, pay out to shareholders.
Yeah.
With an NGO, it's a not-for-profit. So that money has to be spent on the activities you're there to do. Now, if you're quite a small setup with 2 or 3 people and all of a sudden you get £1 million or €1 million worth of investment from a trust, then all of a sudden you're going to have quite a big problem because you're going to have to upscale very, very quickly.
Exactly.
To do that.
And one of the dangers with that I have seen happening is that then organizations attempt to upscale on the staff side, for example, which is for many of our organizations crucial for our work, that we have a good number of staff and competent staff. But the problem is that that's also where it's becoming difficult to downscale again afterwards. So then 1 year we have a lot of donors, we upscale, we employ new staff, and next year the finances are not that good, but we are left with a running cost on staff, for example. So it's also to keep in mind never to upscale more and upscale your consumption more, then you can be sure that you can maintain next year and the year after.
It's interesting because, we've had, if we think back, 7 or 8 years ago, when there was massive economic pressures globally after the financial crash, and automatically the investment that went into the third sector, the investment that went into NGOs, as a result of that went down. And there were a lot of bigger organisations than our organisation that had those big buildings, lots of staff, that in a time of plenty could sustain that. But as soon as that happened, they were closing down or they were shutting down because they didn't have another way of operating in a smaller way. And I think one of the things that's been beneficial for our organisation is we've been able to concertina. And when things are good, we can expand and bring in extra people. But when things aren't so good, we can shrink down again. And I think that ability in an NGO, that of you to be financially, to be able to reflect to the current climate, which can change over a 6 month. I mean, the pandemic being a perfect example. If you couldn't adapt to what's just happened and the impact on NGOs in the pandemic, a lot of organisations would have disappeared because of that.
Yeah. Just a low practical example on how we have been doing it in Intercollege. When we started up, we started with a relatively small office, just 2 rooms. We made a rental contract on that, but we made sure to take a building where we can expand and where there was room available next door. And when we took the next rooms, when we expanded and took the next rooms, I insisted towards the landlord to make it as a separate contract. Because that would make it possible for me to cancel the new contract and go back to the initial space that we had, so to downsize again. And that makes me sleep more safe at night, makes me sleep more calm at night, that I'm confident that if something happens, I can scale down, I can go down to the cost level that we had in the very beginning. I'm not bound in the very long term to costs that might exceed the income.
We've spoken a little bit about the kind of almost lack of structure, if you like, and the fact that we kind of learn things as we grew as organisations. Do you think it's important for new NGOs? Do you think there's certain models? And I appreciate some of this may change from one country to another, but are there certain models of setting up NGOs as far as a financial structure? Do you need kind of a board that oversees that? Do you need finance officers, etc., etc.?
I mean, it depends very much on your size. A board of elected board can be a fantastic resource for you, also to see new opportunities, to see new directions to go in. I mean, if you're just a one-man show, then your growth potential is limited to your own fantasy. Whereas when you have other people with you on the board, then you grow that.
And at what point did you, as an organisation, start bringing on extra people, whether that's accountants or dedicated finance staff, and has that changed over different points as an organisation?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we had to take in an accountant at a certain stage. In the very beginning of Intercollege, I was sitting and doing the bookkeeping myself and all the financial management. But as the organisation grew, it wasn't possible time-wise for me to do this. So yes, we had to take in an external accountant that would oversee all this, and then of course me being in dialogue with that accountant, because as it is an external accountant, is also not somebody who have no clue what's going on inside our organization, and there are a lot of debate, and there's a lot of discussion, a lot of deliberation about things, saying how should we account this one, this receipt, what project does it go in? That would be a black box for the account, right? So it requires a close dialogue with these external accountants.
Mm. And I suppose there's thinking about my own organisation, I suppose there's stages with the organisation. There's things that it just becomes past your skill set. You can kind of think, well, actually, I'll keep this in house, so I've got ownership of it, so I can control exactly what's going on. But one, there's a time thing; you don't have the time to do everything, and then secondly, also there's certainly when we started working closely with our accountants and having a dedicated finance, there's someone to specifically look at that thing, and they're aware of opportunities, of things that we need to do as far as recording and managing things that I never would have done, if it was left to me.
Exactly, to see the new opportunities. And also to be corrected in what we're doing, because maybe we do things because we think they're right, and when somebody else looks into it and question it, maybe it could be done differently. So yes, it's enriching the work and qualifying the work if we are getting somebody else to look into it. I completely agree.
Thank you.